That morning I woke up feeling drained, my head pounding and my body heavy with exhaustion. Still, I pushed myself to power through the day, attending meetings, answering countless emails, and enduring a string of repetitive presentations. But by midday, the fatigue had worn me down. Unable to keep going, I decided to head home early. I didn't think it was worth informing Beverly. She was probably wrapped up in one of her true crime shows or busy crafting something for one of her endless Pinterest boards. When I stepped into the house, an unsettling quiet greeted me. Typically, Beverly would be there, welcoming me with a hug and her signature lavender-scented candle filling the air. That simple warmth was something I cherished about her. She had a way of turning the ordinary into something memorable. But that day, there was none of that. No soft footsteps. No familiar fragrance. Just an eerie silence that settled over everything. I walked in and slipped off my shoes, an odd feeling creeping over me. Something didn't sit right. That's when I spotted it, a jacket tossed over the living room chair. But not just any jacket. It belonged to Bradley. My stomach tightened instantly. What was my brother doing at my house in the middle of the day? Bradley had always had a magnetic personality, the kind of guy who could win people over in a heartbeat. But he also had a habit of dropping by without notice. Maybe he just stopped to grab something. Maybe he was killing time. Still, the quiet in the house didn't feel right. Then I heard it, Beverly's laugh. Light and melodic, but something about it was off. It didn't sound like the easy laughter she gave while watching television. It was softer, more intimate. My pulse sped up. I tried to calm myself, telling myself they could just be catching up, reliving old memories. I wanted that to be true. But as I climbed the stairs, her laughter gave way to whispers, and then came sounds I couldn't misinterpret. My heart hammered in my chest. My head spun. I reached the bedroom door and stood there, already picturing the betrayal I hadn't yet seen. Slowly, I eased the door open. And there they were, Beverly and Bradley wrapped around each other in the bed I had shared with her for years. The sight knocked the breath out of me. I didn't yell. I didn't storm in. I simply froze. Bradley turned and saw me standing there. He didn't look startled. Instead, he smirked like he had achieved some sick victory. My own brother. In that moment, something within me shifted. I didn't scream or lash out. I pulled out my phone with eerie calm and said, "I just sent your wife a video of you too." The arrogance drained from Bradley's face. Panic replaced it. He lunged for his phone, voice trembling. "What did you do?" Beverly sat upright, color draining from her face, her lips moving but no words coming out. I didn't wait to hear any excuses. Nothing they said could matter anymore. I stepped back, watching as Bradley scrambled to call Diana his wife. I could hear her voice, sharp and furious through the speaker. His charm didn't save him this time. His voice cracked as he tried to explain, but Diana wasn't having it. And neither was I. Beverly reached out, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It was a mistake," she whispered. I didn't meet her eyes. "A mistake." I repeated, my tone flat. "Forgetting to lock the door is a mistake. This was a decision." Without another glance, I turned and walked out, leaving them in the thick of their shame and confusion. As I made my way downstairs, my thoughts churned with fury, disbelief, and surprisingly relief. Relief that their deception was no longer a secret. Relief that I saw them for who they really were. I sank into a chair in the living room, listening to the chaos erupting upstairs as Bradley tried in vain to patch things up with Diana. It was strange how numb I felt. It was as if my emotions had stepped aside, giving me space to process the wreckage. I wasn't focused on the years I had spent with Beverly or the connection I believed I had with my brother. My mind was already on the future, how I would reclaim my life and leave their betrayal behind me. When they finally appeared at the top of the stairs, their faces pale and full of dread, I looked at them and said with calm resolve, "Now, let's talk about what comes next." People often say that having a twin means having a lifelong best friend. I heard that sentiment constantly growing up. "You and Bradley must be so close," people would say with bright smiles. I'd nod along, pretending that was true. But the reality couldn't have been more different. From the very start, there were comparisons, at first innocent, like who walked first or who spoke sooner. But as we grew older, those comparisons grew sharper. I was labeled the intelligent twin, the dependable one, the natural leader. Bradley was seen as the funny one, the carefree spirit, the unpredictable force. At family events, relatives would give me nods of approval for my academic success. They would glance at Bradley and say things like, "Don't worry, you'll find your passion eventually," as if simply being himself didn't quite measure up. The bitterness didn't erupt all at once, it crept in gradually like a slow, steady drip filling a glass. Bradley would deflect it all with humor, but the truth flickered in his gaze, frustration simmering beneath the surface. When I won first place in our school's science fair, he deliberately sabotaged my display the evening before. Later, when I began dating my first girlfriend, it took only a few weeks before he charmed her away. That was Bradley's method of balancing the scales. If he couldn't outperform me, he'd take from me instead. As time passed, our rivalry lost its sharpness but never faded entirely. I poured effort into building a stable life and climbed my way up in my profession. Bradley, in contrast, leapt from one big idea to another: real estate gambles, startup fantasies, and half-baked money-making schemes. None ever took off. And no matter how the years rolled by, family gatherings remained consistent. Our parents would turn to me with weary eyes and plead, "Can you talk some sense into your brother?" Family dinners followed a script, Bradley arriving late, flashing his irresistible grin, and spending the evening mocking me for laughs. The jokes landed because Bradley was effortlessly funny and I had always been the one who could take it. "That's just Bradley," they'd say, brushing it off like it was harmless. But behind the laughter, I felt the barbs in every word. He was dismantling the image I had worked so hard to build, piece by piece. The first time I brought Beverly home to meet everyone, I noticed the shift in Bradley instantly. He turned on his usual charm, but this time there was something more calculated in it. It wasn't just mischief, it was a deliberate attempt to claim something precious. I let it slide. Beverly seemed unfazed by his antics, and I believed in her. That was where I went wrong. I don't think Bradley ever stopped seeing me as a reflection of everything he didn't have. My achievements made him feel smaller, every word of praise I received echoing like a judgment of his failures. Through the years, I made an effort to close the distance between us. I extended help when he faltered, stood up for him when others had given up, and welcomed him into my world even when it meant sacrifice. I clung to the hope that we might one day share the connection that others assumed we already had. But Bradley didn't crave brotherhood, he craved a challenger. Now, as I reflect on it, the red flags were there all along. His offhand comments about Beverly began to cross a subtle line. He dropped by our home when I wasn't around, offering half-hearted reasons. Even his goodbyes stretched a little too long. I dismissed it all, reassuring myself that he would never go that far. After all, he was family. That meant something, didn't it? To Bradley, it never meant what it did to me. I wasn't his brother, I was a constant reminder of where he had fallen short. So when the chance came to take something from me again, he didn't hesitate. This time, it wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated. He wanted me to witness his victory firsthand, to taste defeat. That smirk on his face when I caught him in my bed wasn't just arrogance, it was triumph. He truly believed he had finally won. But Bradley had always underestimated me. And this time he wouldn't get away clean. I had spent a lifetime picking up after his chaos, letting him slide with his small victories. That era was over. As I watched him scramble for his phone, panicked and shaky, trying to call Diana, a strange calm washed over me. This wasn't just about what happened with Beverly. It was about years of buried anger finally coming to the surface. Bradley believed he could take what was mine and walk away without consequence. But for the first time, I wasn't going to be the one to shield him. I would let him face what he had earned. I wouldn't interfere, not this time. Thinking back, I keep asking myself when it really started, the affair, I mean. Not just the physical side, but the bond forming between Beverly and Bradley that I had been too blind to notice. Was it that very first dinner, when he waltzed in late and lit up the room with that grin of his? Or was it later, during those spontaneous visits while I was at work, when he always seemed to have a weak excuse to stop by? Beverly and Bradley crossed paths just a few weeks after we began dating. I had always been upfront with Beverly about having a twin, though I never delved into the messy layers of our relationship. At the time, I didn't think it was relevant. Beverly had a grounded, genuine presence that put people at ease. Bradley, meanwhile, was unpredictable, one moment engaging, the next completely exasperating. I didn't imagine they'd hit it off, but I had underestimated Bradley's ability to command attention. Their first meeting was during a family dinner. I introduced Beverly around and she fit right in. My mother was instantly fond of her. My father gave a nod of quiet approval. Even my cousins gravitated toward her. And then there was Bradley, acting like they were already old friends, throwing out punchlines with practiced ease. He used to joke about her favorite films, even betting with her over some random trivia. Beverly would laugh at his behavior, and I didn't pay it much attention, it was just typical Bradley. Over the next several months, though, he began appearing more and more often. At first, it seemed harmless enough. He'd swing by claiming he needed to borrow a tool or retrieve something he'd forgotten during a previous visit. But gradually, his visits became routine and his justifications less convincing. "I was just nearby," he'd say, or "thought I'd check on you too." Honestly, I didn't mind too much in the beginning. I wanted to believe that Bradley was finally making an effort to rebuild the bond we never really shared as brothers. Beverly, ever warm and welcoming, always greeted him with genuine kindness. I didn't see the changes right away, they crept in slowly. Beverly laughed a little longer at Bradley's jokes. His goodbyes started to linger. Then came the hushed conversations. I'd walk into the house and find them sitting close, talking quietly, their heads nearly touching. When I asked, they'd simply say they were catching up. And I believed them. Why wouldn't I? Beverly was my wife. Bradley was my twin brother. I had no reason to doubt either of them. But there was one moment that never left me. We were throwing a barbecue and Bradley was in his element, joking, grilling, entertaining. At one point, Beverly accidentally spilled something on her shirt. Bradley instantly rushed to help, grabbing a napkin and blotting the spot. It was a small thing, seemed innocent enough. Yet, in that fleeting second, the look they exchanged made my stomach tighten. I told myself I was being paranoid, brushing it off as nothing. Still, a seed of doubt had taken root. Beverly and I had always seemed strong. At least, that's what I believed. She wasn't the kind to argue or complain. Now though, I wonder if that silence was part of the issue. Did she feel unseen? Unappreciated? Sure, I worked long hours. But I did it for us, for the life we were building. I thought she understood. I thought she was content. But maybe Bradley offered her what I couldn't: attention, surprise, a break from the predictability of married life. It's painful to accept the idea that your wife may have found comfort in another man, worse, in your own brother. The real betrayal wasn't limited to the final act, it was layered in the many decisions that led there. The lingering glances. The whispered conversations. Those subtle, intimate moments that gradually edged me out. They made choice after choice that brought them closer together while pushing me further away. And the most cutting part? Bradley knew me well. He recognized my weaknesses, the moments I'd be too distracted to notice the fractures. And Beverly, she opened the door wide, knowing exactly what that would mean for our relationship. When I discovered them together, tangled in bed, all illusions vanished. Their connection was clear as day. And Bradley? His smug expression wasn't just confident, it was defiant. He wasn't regretful. He wasn't ashamed. He was proud, as though he'd won some sick competition. But Beverly, her expression said something different. There was shame, yes, but mostly there was regret. Not because she betrayed me, but because she'd been caught. Her decision had been made long before that night, and now she had to deal with the aftermath. Whatever excitement she thought she'd found with Bradley, whatever thrill had made the risk seem worthwhile, none of it could outweigh what she was about to lose. That truth is what I clung to as I turned and left the room. Let them keep their secret moments, their quiet betrayal. I wanted no part in it anymore. I had more important things to protect: my self-respect, my peace of mind, and the path ahead of me without them. And then came the words that changed everything. Bradley's face twisted in disbelief as I spoke. I just sent your wife a video of you too. That arrogant smirk he wore faded instantly, wiped clean like a board under a sponge. Panic overtook him. For the first time I had the upper hand. His voice wavered as he fumbled with his phone, desperately trying to call Diana, his wife. Diana, sharp, independent, and never one to tolerate disloyalty. Bradley knew it. The confidence drained from his face, replaced by fear. What did you do? He asked, his voice shaky. He mumbled nervously, tapping through his contacts, then brought the phone to his ear. Once. Twice. Then she answered. Even from across the room, I could hear her anger. What is this, Bradley? Her tone was sharp, unforgiving. What exactly am I seeing right now? Bradley's complexion turned ghostly. He stuttered, trying to explain. Diana, please. It's not what it looks like. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. The nerve. Not what it looks like. The sheer nerve of it. Bradley shot a glance my way, sharp but hollow. The fire that once fueled his confidence was gone, replaced by the realization that he had no way out. This time he was the one trapped, cornered with no defense. Then came Diana's voice, fierce and cutting, slicing through the tension like a blade. Her fury carried across the room, loud enough for Beverly, who stood pale and frozen on the other side, to hear every word. You're in bed with your brother's wife, Bradley? What part of this isn't exactly what it looks like? She demanded, her voice trembling with rage. Bradley fumbled for words, scrambling to explain, but Diana wasn't done. You make me sick. Do you hear me? Sick. Don't come back. Don't even think about stepping foot in our home. We're finished. The call ended with a harsh click, and the silence that followed was deafening. Bradley remained frozen, the phone still pressed against his ear, as if willing it to ring again. But deep down, he knew she wouldn't call back. We both did. Finally, Beverly spoke, her voice just a whisper. Bradley, I didn't mean for this to happen. I cut her off, my voice cold. Save it. My eyes locked onto Bradley's. Neither of you meant for this, right? It just happened? That's the excuse you're both going with. Bradley turned toward me, the fear in his eyes slowly morphing into frustration. Why would you do this? He asked, his voice shaky. You could have come to me. You didn't have to drag Diana into it. I stepped closer, my tone deliberate and calm. Are you serious right now? You're standing in my house, in my bedroom, with my wife, and you're asking why I called you out? You've lost the right to ask anything. He tried to meet my eyes but failed. His shoulders dropped as the weight of his choices came crashing down, and he slumped onto the edge of the bed like a man realizing just how far he'd fallen. She's going to leave me, he mumbled to himself. Good, I said without hesitation. She deserves someone who respects her. Beverly took a tentative step forward, voice shaking. Caleb, please, I turned to her, cutting her off. Don't. Just don't. I can't hear it. Not now. She stood there, tears streaking down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. Whatever affection I once held had been smothered by her betrayal. The room felt heavy, stifling with their guilt and my anger. I needed them out of my space. Turning back to Bradley, I said firmly, you need to leave. Now. He didn't move at first, clinging to his phone like it held answers. Where am I supposed to go? He asked quietly. Not my concern, I replied flatly. You created this mess. Deal with it. Just not here. Slowly, he stood up, glancing at Beverly, who looked just as defeated. Neither of them spoke as they shuffled toward the door. I followed, watching as Bradley struggled with his car keys. As he climbed into his vehicle, I leaned against the doorway. Oh, and Bradley, I said calmly, Diana's smart. She'll make sure you lose everything. You might want to prepare for that. He didn't answer or even look my way. The engine started and the car rolled down the driveway, leaving me standing there, heart pounding. I had no plan, no next step. But I knew one thing for sure, Bradley's smug confidence was gone. He no longer held the upper hand. I did. And I wasn't about to give it back. Once the door shut behind them, the house became eerily still. I stood motionless, staring at the empty space where they had just stood, overwhelmed by a torrent of emotions, anger, betrayal, sorrow, and strangely, a sense of peace. A strange combination. But one thing I didn't feel was regret. Exposing them was not only justified, it was necessary. I moved to the living room and sank into the couch, exhaustion washing over me like a wave. The weight of everything that had happened settled deep in my bones. My phone buzzed from the coffee table. I reached for it without thinking. A message from Diana. Thank you for telling me. I'll take care of it from here. Short and to the point. Diana had never been one to waste time or words. That message confirmed it. Bradley's world was about to crumble and Diana wasn't about to let him off the hook. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered that smug look on his face, the one he wore when he thought he'd beaten me. That memory would never fade. I thought about calling my parents. Maybe they deserve to hear the truth too. But how do you even begin that kind of conversation? Hey, Mom, Dad, guess what? Bradley's been sleeping with my wife. Not yet. I needed time. This was my burden for now, and I had to figure out what to do next. The hours crept by slowly, and the house felt emptier than ever. I drifted into the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets, desperate for some kind of distraction. I wasn't hungry, I just needed to keep my hands moving, keep my mind from spiraling. But no matter how hard I tried, the image kept flashing in my mind, again and again, each time more painful. Beverly's betrayal stung deeply, but Bradley's was something else entirely. He wasn't just my brother, he was my twin. We had shared birthdays, secrets, childhood laughter. And he threw it all away. For what? A brief, reckless moment? A chance to outdo me in a rivalry he'd carried for years? I couldn't stop replaying the look on his face as I stepped into the bedroom, that smug, victorious expression. It wasn't merely smugness, it was the kind of satisfaction that came from knowing he'd crushed me. He had wanted me to witness the betrayal, to feel every ounce of the devastation. That was the real sting. As the sun sank behind the trees, I knew I couldn't stay in that house another minute. It wasn't only the stillness that choked me, it was the ghosts of what once was. Every corner whispered memories, the dining table where Beverly and I had laughed over countless dinners, the couch that had seen hours of our favorite series, and worst of all, the bed upstairs now tainted by deception. With no destination in mind, I grabbed my keys and drove, the car engine buzzing just loud enough to blur my racing thoughts. Without really planning to, I ended up outside Diana's house. It felt like the right place to be, though I hadn't consciously chosen it. When I knocked, she opened the door with a face marked by both exhaustion and anger. Without a word, she stepped aside to let me in. We moved into her living room. She dropped into an armchair and motioned for me to sit across from her. Would you like a drink? She asked, her tone flat and weary. Yeah, I answered, unsure whether I needed something strong or just plain water. She came back with 2 glasses of red wine and handed one to me before settling back into her seat. For a while, we sat there in weighted silence, both staring blankly at the floor. Finally, Diana broke it. "I always had this feeling he might pull something like this," she said, her voice edged with resentment. "I just never imagined it would be with her." I nodded, taking a long sip. I didn't think Bradley would stoop this low, but maybe I was just blind to who he really was. Diana gave a bitter chuckle. "He's always had this chip on his shoulder about you. I've seen it. The way he competes, always trying to outshine you. I just didn't think he'd take it this far." "Neither did I said, my voice quiet. We spent hours unraveling the signs we had ignored. Diana recounted how Bradley had grown distant, coming home later and later. I shared the subtle cues I had dismissed, Beverly's quiet phone calls, the way her eyes lingered just a moment too long when Bradley was around. By the time I got up to leave, the pain hadn't vanished, but it felt just a bit easier to carry. Walking back into my house later that night, everything looked the same, still, hollow, and unbearable. But I wasn't the same. Something within me had shifted. I no longer hesitated or questioned what needed to happen. Beverly and Bradley had drawn their line in the sand. Now they had to deal with what came next. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold, legal battles, fractured families, endless explanations, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let this destroy me. Bradley thought he had come out on top. He was wrong. The final move hadn't been played. The following days melted into a blur of legal consultations, unending paperwork, and thoughts that refused to quiet. The decision was inevitable. I couldn't remain married to Beverly after what she had done, and any bond with Bradley was irreparably broken. The betrayal had left deep scars. The morning after everything fell apart, I called a lawyer. Our conversation was all business, cold and efficient, a sharp contrast to the chaos inside me. They asked about property, children. Thankfully, Beverly and I didn't have any proof. When I mentioned the video, they said it would make everything faster and more definitive. To my surprise, Beverly didn't fight me. When I handed over the divorce papers, she barely flinched. "I deserve this," she said softly, barely audible. For once, I didn't disagree. She spent the next few days packing quietly. Each box that left the house felt like a step toward the end. Meanwhile, Bradley made it anything but easy. The calls started pouring in. Dozens. The first time I answered, his voice burst through, furious. "Why'd you have to show that video to Diana? You've wrecked my life." I hung up immediately. He tried again. "Caleb, I wasn't trying to hurt you. It just happened. Can't we move past it?" Move past it. The nerve. I told him not to contact me again, but Bradley never could take no for an answer. When I stopped picking up, he showed up at my door. I didn't let him in. I stood firmly on the porch, arms folded, watching him unravel. "What do you want, Bradley?" I asked. I need to speak to you face to face," he pleaded, looking desperate. "There's nothing to say," I replied coolly. "You made your decision. Now live with it." "No, please, I shut the door before he could finish. Not out of spite, but to protect myself. Letting Bradley back in, even for a single moment, felt like opening the door to poison. Diana wasn't only filing for divorce. She was taking Bradley to court. She was determined to claim everything: alimony, a fair portion of his assets, even the home they once shared. And truthfully, I was cheering her on from the sidelines. If there was anyone who deserved to walk away with nothing, it was Bradley. Naturally, our parents became involved. They were heartbroken, although not entirely caught off guard. In one of our tense conversations, my mom quietly admitted we always knew Bradley could be difficult. But then she added, "We just don't know how to respond to all this." My father, however, took a much harder stance. His words were sharp and final: "He's no longer part of this family. You don't treat your own flesh and blood that way." Even though their support should have brought comfort, it didn't. There was nothing about this situation that felt right or soothing. Beverly, meanwhile, faded into the background. She moved in with a friend and distanced herself from anyone close to me. Occasionally, she'd send messages, apologies, attempts to make amends, but I never replied. What was the use? Forgiving her wouldn't undo what she had done. The legal process advanced quickly, thanks to the overwhelming evidence stacked against both Beverly and Bradley. When the divorce was officially finalized, a surprising emotion washed over me, not quite joy, but a kind of relief that came close. All through this nightmare, Diana stayed in touch. She was unwavering, strong, and carried herself with a calm determination I couldn't help but admire. We met now and then to share updates and vent about everything we were going through. Those moments became a lifeline, helping me remember I wasn't alone in facing this chaos. One evening, while we were sharing a quiet moment over coffee, Diana asked me, "Do you think they ever regret it?" I paused, letting the question sink in before I responded. Bradley regrets that he got caught. Beverly misses the life we built together. But do they actually regret their actions? I honestly have no idea. And at this point, I don't care. Diana nodded slowly, her thoughts clearly mirroring mine. Yeah, I get that. Once the papers were signed, the property divided, and the emotional ties officially severed, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The sting of betrayal lingered, but it didn't press down on me as heavily as before. I had weathered the worst of the storm. And for the first time in months, there was a sense of hope, a faint light breaking through the clouds. Bradley and Beverly weren't so lucky. Bradley's world collapsed, his marriage ended, his name was tarnished, and a large portion of his finances vanished, courtesy of Diana's unyielding legal team. Beverly found herself in a similar situation, confined to a modest apartment and stuck in a job that clearly drained her spirit. As for me, I was slowly rebuilding. It wasn't easy, but I was finding my way back, piece by piece. The pain they left behind wouldn't vanish overnight, but I was determined not to let it define me. I had regained my freedom, and every step of that difficult path had been worth it. Still, even when the legal matters were behind me, a heavy silence hung in the air. The house that had once been filled with shared laughter now felt stifling and cold, filled with memories that had lost their warmth. The joyful ones now seemed fake, while the painful ones had simply been waiting for their turn to surface. I realized I couldn't keep living in a place so steeped in betrayal. So I began to make changes. I started with the bedroom. The bed, the curtains, the wall color, everything had to go. I replaced them all with pieces that felt like they belonged to me and only me. But I soon discovered that healing wasn't as simple as changing furniture. The emotional damage ran deeper than I had expected. Some nights, I'd sit alone, trapped in a loop of painful memories, Bradley's smug face, Beverly's anxious expression, Diana's fiery voice crackling through the phone. I couldn't make it stop. Diana and I kept in touch, and our talks began to move beyond the legal drama. We began sharing deeper frustrations, raw emotions, and even managed to find a sliver of humor in the wreckage Bradley and Beverly had caused. I can't believe I married someone so clueless about consequences, Diana said during one of our chats. I laughed lightly, replying, same here. But hey, at least they're stuck with each other now. We both chuckled, though neither of us really found it funny. Their downfall was impossible to ignore. Bradley had truly lost it all. His wife, his credibility, and financial security were gone. Diana's lawyer had seen to that. He even had to give up his car and move into a tiny apartment, juggling several part-time jobs just to make ends meet. Beverly wasn't doing much better. She landed in a shabby apartment on the other side of town and ended up working at a local cafe. Friends who bumped into her said she looked drained, a shadow of who she once was. During another one of our coffee meetups, Diana drifted into reflection. Do you think they're happy now? She asked, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. I took a moment before answering. I doubt they even know what happiness is. They saw their affair as exciting, something bold and worth the risk. But now? Now all they're left with is the wreckage. Diana agreed. It's ironic, really. They thought they were so clever, above it all, and now they have absolutely nothing. She was right. Bradley and Beverly had convinced themselves that their relationship, built on lies and betrayal, could last. But in the end, the consequences of their actions proved far too heavy to carry. The bond they once shared, once shrouded in secrecy and sparked by thrill, eventually unraveled in the face of the harsh truth they themselves had crafted. Word spread quickly, arguments had become a daily routine for the two of them. What had once felt exhilarating soon turned into a mess for everyone to see. Bradley, who had long coasted through life with little more than his charm, ended up isolated. Those who had once admired his charismatic flair now saw him differently. He was a man who had betrayed his own brother. Beverly, on the other hand, wandered aimlessly, clinging to anything that might give her life some meaning again. As for me, I was piecing my life back together, slowly but with intention. I poured myself into work, rediscovered passions I had long set aside, and rekindled old friendships that reminded me of the person I once was. I even began volunteering at a community shelter, a dream I had kept on the back burner for years. Through all of this, Diana became a central part of my healing process. The experiences we shared built a connection that was difficult to explain. She truly understood the storm of emotions, hurt, anger, doubt that I was dealing with. As time passed, our conversations gradually shifted. We spoke less about the betrayal and more about our lives, our aspirations, and our hopes for the future. One calm evening, while walking through a peaceful park, Diana shared a thought that stayed with me. She said she had once believed their actions would cast a permanent shadow over her life. But now she saw things in a new light. They were just a chapter, not the entire book. She was right. Bradley and Beverly belonged to my past, but they did not have the power to define my future. Their betrayal had cut deep, but it also pushed me to grow in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Eventually, the pain began to dull. It never completely vanished. Some emotional wounds leave lasting marks, but it no longer consumed my every thought. I learned how to smile without forcing it, to cherish the small, beautiful moments, and to welcome the idea of happiness again. Meanwhile, Bradley and Beverly became nothing more than distant echoes from a former life I no longer wanted to revisit. Their world continued to collapse. Bradley struggled to hold down even the simplest jobs, his once dependable charm now falling flat. Beverly, burdened by guilt and inner turmoil, slowly faded into irrelevance. The foundation of their relationship, built on lies and secrecy, couldn't survive the real world. In contrast, my path was becoming clearer. My days grew brighter, and I no longer carried the weight of their decisions. They may have damaged their own lives, but they hadn't destroyed mine. After a long time, I finally felt unburdened, truly free, and for that I was thankful. Healing after betrayal isn't about pretending the pain never existed. It's about learning how to coexist with it and keep moving forward. The emotional scars left by Beverly and Bradley slowly softened. They never disappeared entirely, scars rarely do, but they lost their sting, their grip. For the first time in years, I could breathe deeply and freely. I no longer wanted to remain tied to a space filled with painful memories. I took charge, I replaced the furniture, gave the walls a fresh coat of paint, and shaped my surroundings into a reflection of who I had become. This transformation wasn't just cosmetic, it was symbolic. I was taking back my identity, one step at a time. I reconnected with old companions, rekindled forgotten hobbies, and started mentoring young people at a local youth center. Devoting my time to something positive and untainted helped restore my sense of direction. Slowly, I was rediscovering the version of myself that had been hidden under the weight of betrayal. Diana continued to be a source of strength throughout this evolution. What began as shared grief turned into a meaningful friendship. Our conversations no longer circled around Bradley or Beverly, they barely came up anymore. Instead, we talked about our goals, shared laughs, and found joy in ordinary moments. Diana had a way of seeing beauty in the world despite everything, and her optimism became contagious. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and we sat quietly on a park bench, Diana voiced something that struck a chord. She said she used to believe Bradley's betrayal was the end, a closing chapter. But now she viewed it as a fresh start, a doorway to something better. And she was right. Their choices didn't have to write the rest of my story. I held the pen now. Meanwhile, their lives continued to crumble. I heard through the grapevine, Bradley couldn't keep a job for more than a few weeks and was barely staying afloat. Beverly was moving from one unstable place to another, her once bright spirit dulled by remorse. Their bond, founded on deception, couldn't survive without the thrill of secrecy. Once they vanished, there was nothing real to keep them together. They fell apart as quickly as they had come together. There was a time when I might have found a bitter satisfaction in their collapse, but not anymore. I felt nothing. Their fate was no longer mine to worry about. I had come to a point where my priorities shifted, my well-being and the life ahead of me took center stage. As the years rolled on, genuine contentment settled into my life. My friendships grew stronger, my career flourished, and my everyday moments were rich with calm and happiness. Though the wounds of betrayal hadn't completely disappeared, they no longer held power over me. Instead, they served as marks of my endurance, evidence of the courage it took to push forward. Diana and I grew closer than ever. She, too, was on her own path of recovery with a personal story to navigate, but our support for one another was something rare, something only we could offer each other. At times, I caught myself questioning whether what we shared might evolve into something deeper. But I chose not to hurry anything. I needed to be certain that I had healed enough, that I wouldn't let old heartaches tarnish something potentially beautiful. Then one day, Diana looked me in the eye and said something that echoed in my mind for a long while. "Caleb, you deserve real happiness. Don't let the pain from your past keep you from reaching for it." Her words struck a chord deep inside me. I had been so focused on getting through the day, on rebuilding piece by piece, that I hadn't paused to think about what happiness meant to me now. Gradually, I opened up to the idea of dreaming again. I let thoughts of a future rooted in trust, love, and unexplored possibilities take root in my mind. When I finally embraced this new beginning, Bradley and Beverly had faded into insignificance. I had no interest in their fate, it no longer mattered. They had made their choices and I had made mine. But the path I chose led me toward healing and rebuilding, toward something far greater. For the first time in what felt like forever, I experienced a sense of hope. Hope for fresh starts, for connections that mattered, for a life that wasn't anchored in betrayal but grounded in growth and strength. It was a hopeful vision, one of promise, perseverance, and brighter days ahead. This was my story, and I was finally prepared to turn the page. It wouldn't be flawless, nothing ever is, but it would be mine. And that alone made it worthwhile. Dear listeners, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. If the story touched you in any way, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.